Okay, so now we're going to learn how to factor trinomials where the coefficient of the squared term is not 1. So for instance, here you see that the coefficient is 5x squared plus 6x plus 1, but the coefficient of the squared term is 5. So we're going to factor these into two binomials. So we'll have a term here, and 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 then between these terms we'll have either plus or minus signs. So I want you to think back to FOIL. If you were to put some terms in here in FOIL, you know that these first terms, whatever you put here and here, their product has to equal the 5x squared. And then the last terms, whatever you put here and here, their product has to equal the third term, the 1. So the product of the first terms must equal 5x squared. So the only option there is x and 5x. So we'll just keep that for now. And then the product of the last terms must equal 1. Now remember, to get the last terms product of two terms that equal 1, you could use 1 and 1, positive 1, positive 1, or you could use negative 1 and negative 1. So it just depends. Now, so what we're going to do, we're going to try different options here and then check it until we get the right factors that will yield this middle term up here. Okay? This middle term right here of 6x. So we got to make sure we get the 6x for the middle term. So let me just show you here. Sometimes on simpler problems, trial and error works well. Other times it doesn't work as well. So I'm going to try, for the first terms, I'm going to try x and 5x, like I said. And then for the last terms, I'm going to try the minus 1 and the minus 1. Well, if we did the calculations here, we know that x times 5x is 5x squared. That's not a problem. We know that negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. That's not a problem. But if we do the outer product, we'll get minus x, and the inner product is minus 5x. And if we add those together, we get negative 6x, which is wrong. We don't want a negative 6x. So I'll tell you what let's do. Let's change the signs to plus 1 and plus 1. Now, if we do this, we'll still get x times 5x is 5x squared, and 1 times 1 is still 1. But now, look at the middle term here. We take the outer product here, and we get x. And the inner product here is 5x, and x plus 5x is 6x, which is the correct middle term. So, we've got the answer. 5x squared plus 6x plus 1 factors into x plus 1 and 5x plus 1. Okay, let's do another one. Here, my first factors have to be factors of 3p squared, and my last terms have to be factors of 5. So, that pretty much, 3p squared, 3 is a prime number, so that pretty much means p and 3p are my only options. But, in order for me to get 5 for the last term, the only factors of 5 that I can use are 1 and 5, or negative 1 and negative 5. And then, of course, I need to make sure I get the middle term of negative 16p when I FOIL. So I'm going to try some things here. For now, I'm just going to, you can just assume that the product of the first terms on each of these is going to be 3p squared, and the product of the last terms on each of these is going to be 5. So all I have to do is check the middle term. So if I do this, I get 5p plus 3p, which is 8p. That's wrong. That's not what I want. So let's do the next one. The next one, if I multiply these together, I get p plus 15p, which is 16p. Well, that's still not right because the middle term is minus 16p. So what if we change both signs? So let's change both signs to minus. So now if I do that, I get p times minus 1 is minus p, and minus 5 times 3p is minus 15p, and we know that minus p minus 15p is minus 16p. So that gave me the correct middle term, so this must factor into p minus 5 and 3p minus 1. Okay, now those first two weren't too bad because I didn't have a whole lot of factors to choose from. But here it starts getting a little tricky. See, for 15x squared, you actually can use x or 15x and 15x, or you could use 3x and 5x. And then for 12y squared, there's lots of options. You could use y and 12y, 2y and 6y, 3y and 4y, and you'd also have to consider the negative ones. Negative y and negative 12y, their product would be 12y squared as well. So all three of these pairs, their products would be 12y squared as well. And we would try different options until we get the middle term, negative 29xy. So this could take a long time. So this is a candidate for us to do as grouping. And we will do this by grouping a little bit later. But let me just show you what you would do. So if you tried x and 15x and then started trying values for the last term of y and 12y or 2y and 6y and so forth, you're actually going to find out that the middle term is not going to give you minus 29xy. And actually it's not going to work for x for any of the combinations that involve x and 15x. So you might switch to 5x and 3x and try that. So I'm going to try 5x minus 6y and 3x minus 2y. Well, if I check the middle term here, I get minus 10xy minus 18xy. Okay, and that's actually going to be minus 28xy, which is not what I want. So I have to keep looking around until I come up with something. And let me show you what the final answer is after lots of trials. I finally chose 5x and 3x for the first terms and minus 3y and minus 4y for the last terms. And then when you multiply the outer product, you get minus 20xy. And then the inner product is minus 9xy. And minus 20xy minus 9xy give us minus 29xy. That's actually supposed to be 29. I had changed this problem earlier, and I guess I forgot to change it right there. But that's supposed to be minus 29 right there. Okay, so anyway, the product is, so the factors are 5x minus 3y and 3x minus 4y. Okay? Now, let's do the same problem with the grouping method. Now, remember, you need to figure out, on the grouping method, you have to figure out what is A times C. So A is 15, C is 12, so 15 times 12 is 180. So we know that we get 180. So, and then we know the B term is negative 29. So remember, we're looking for two numbers, we called them M and N, whose, when you multiply them together, you get 180. And when you add them together, you get negative 29. Okay? And so notice here that if I use negative 9 and negative 20, notice that their product is 180 and their sum is negative 29. So then I can break up the negative 29xy. I can rewrite the negative 29xy as negative 9xy minus 20xy. So I just replace that term with the minus 9xy minus 20xy, and then I can factor these first two terms by factoring out a 3x out of these two, and then here I can actually factor out a 4y out of the last two. So let me clean this up here so you can see it. Alright, so if you factor 3x out of the first two, here you have it. Down here you're going to get 3x times 5x minus 3y. And if you factor a negative 4 out of these two, you'll get negative 4y, actually a negative 4y. You'll get negative 4y times 5x minus 3y. And now you can see that the first term has a factor of 5x minus 3y. The second term has a factor of 5x minus 3y. So factor the 5x minus 3y out here, and then you're left with 3x minus 4. Okay? That seems a little bit easier, doesn't it? Okay, so let's do some more by the grouping method. Okay, so let's say we want to factor this 3y squared plus 7y plus 2. Well, since a is 3 and c is 2, we know that ac is 6, and we know the b term, the coefficient, is 7. So remember, we need two numbers whose product is 6 and whose sum is 7. Okay, so two numbers whose product is 6 and whose sum is 7. And let's see what would I have here. I would choose 6 and 1, right? 6 and 1. 6 and 1, the product is 6 and their sum is 7. So then that means I can break the 7y up, so I can rewrite this trinomial with 4 terms by rewriting the 7y as 6y plus 1y. Okay? Well, now I can take out of the 3y squared plus 6y, the first two terms, the common factor here would be 3y. So factor a 3y out of the first two terms, and that gives me y plus 2. And then on the second term, I really don't have a common factor other than 1, so let's just say we factor a 1 out of y plus 2, and we get 1 times y plus 2. Then we can factor the y plus 2 out, and we get y plus 2 times 3y plus 1. Okay, here's another one. Notice AC, 5 times negative 8 is negative 40, and B is positive 18. So we need two numbers whose product is negative 40 and whose sum is 18. Well, that would be 20 times negative 2, because 20 times negative 2 is negative 40, and 20 plus negative 2 is positive 18. So that means I need to replace the term in the middle here, the 18yz, with 20yz minus 2yz. And then once I do that, I can factor out the 5y. So factor 5y out of the first two terms, and I get 5y times y plus 4z. And then out of the last two terms, factor out the common factor of minus 2z, and I get minus 2z times y plus 4z. And now you can see you have a common factor of y plus 4z in each of these terms. And now factor the y plus 4z out, and then note what you have left. You have the 5y and the minus 2z left as the other factor. And so there's the answer for that one. Okay, always factor the common factor out first if you have one. So on this example, we can factor a 3 out of each term. So I'm going to factor the 3 out first. So you'll notice here I factored out the 3. And then I have 10z squared minus 29z plus 10. Now I can do 10 times 10, that gives me 100, so AC is 100. And then B is the middle term's coefficient, negative 29. And now if I choose the numbers for m and n to be negative 25 and negative 4, I know negative 25 times negative 4 is 100, and negative 25 plus negative 4 is negative 29. So I'm going to actually replace this negative 29z with negative 25z minus 4z. And then I can take, and I'm doing this inside the parentheses here, so I went ahead and did brackets just to keep the 3 separated. So if I factor out a 5z from the first two terms inside the parentheses, that's going to leave me with 2z minus 5 for the other factor. And then if I factor out a negative 2 from the last two terms, that's going to leave me with 2z minus 5 also as the other factor. And then I can factor the 2z minus 5 out of that, and then I'm left with the 5z here and the minus 2 here. So I have the other factor is 5z minus 2. And don't forget the 3. The 3 is also one of the factors. Okay? Now before you go, you might take a look at these. You can practice on these if you want to. I've given you the answers there. So what you might do is just freeze the video and then practice on factoring these by the grouping method. Now on the third one, you're going to have to factor out the greatest common factor first, and then you can factor what remains with the grouping method. Okay? In the next video, I'm going to talk about factoring problems that come from special products.